We're going to start this video off with a history lesson. Merchants across human history have traditionally done far more than just accumulate money. Culture, ideas, religion, and more have spread across the world alongside the flow of commerce. While this may be somewhat true in 40k still, there's only one thing a rogue trader truly cares about: making sure that profit margins continue to grow exponentially. But in the grim darkness of the far future where there is only war, appearances must be upheld. You gotta look the part of a loyalist, even if it's only lip service, lest a visit from the Inquisition leave you wishing for the sweet release of death. And in Warhammer 40,000 Rogue Trader, there is no cause that can lend you legitimacy more than being an officer of the law. Stomping out heresy and bringing forth Imperial justice are just a few of the things we'll be doing in the Lex Imperialis DLC. No crime will go unnoticed, no punishment too severe, for those who break the sacred laws of the Emperor of Mankind must face only the harshest of justice. And if we happen to make a few $1 trillion along the way, well, that's just good business now, isn't it? Sure, crime may not pay, but beating the snot out of criminals sure does. So come with me as we take a journey across the Coronis expanse. Hardship and peril lurks around every corner, but to our rogue trader, there's nothing to be afraid of. Every chance encounter with death is simply another chance to not only enact the Emperor's will, but make the fattest of stacks while doing it. And as we begin, I would like to say that this video about Warhammer 40,000 Rogue Trader is brought to you by Warhammer 40,000 Rogue Trader. What is Warhammer 40,000 Rogue Trader? Not only is it one of the best CRPGs around, it's the first to take place in the Warhammer 40k setting, and is made in close partnership with Games Workshop itself. Take on the role of a rogue trader, plying the stars for riches, wealth, profit, and perhaps a few things that don't involve monetary gain. Be you a heretic, a staunch loyalist, or even something as insane as a nice person, there's only one thing that matters at the end of the day: making sure the margins stay in the black and upholding the Von Valancius dynasty's power. The Void Shadows DLC was an absolute banger, and now the Lex Imperialis expansion has launched to bring yet another amazing experience. With it introducing the Adeptus Arbites, now you too can properly bring down the hammer of the law on dissident citizens who commit the crimes of wanting decent living conditions and not wanting to be beaten with sticks. With freedom to choose any path you want, in-depth turn-based combat, and co-op with up to 6 other people, this is one of the best ways to get into the universe of Warhammer 40,000. And since this game will be a part of the Steam Summer Sale, now's the perfect time to grab it with a discount. So what are you waiting for? Use my link in the description and pinned comment to go download yourself Warhammer 40,000 Rogue Trader and the Lex Imperialis DLC, so you too can bring about the gentle touch of Imperial law to the galaxy. Now then, time to inform the scum of the galaxy that I, in fact, am the law. For this run, we will be playing as a lawful good arbiter of the Lex Imperialis. However, I don't mean lawful good in the way you're probably expecting. Lawful good characters will usually uphold the spirit of the law, and will likely take action against corrupt officials once evidence can be levied against them. Our rogue trader, the Honorable Drudge Jed, will happily donate to any orphanage he comes across. However, if he can find you in breach of any law he can think of, you are at best going to be facing a flogging. I do not care that you had to feed your starving family of 5, you shouldn't have stolen, buddy. As such, he will be a soldier archetype to better facilitate the shooting of society's criminal underbelly in the face. Our ballistic skill will be our main focus, with some extra points into willpower so we can steel ourselves to do what must be done. Giving our ship a fitting name for an officer of the law such as ourselves, we're ready to set sail. After our introduction to the Von Valancius dynasty starts with a heretical bloodbath and only proceeds to get worse, it becomes clear Drudge Jed needs to take charge to restore some semblance of law and order amongst a clearly faltering situation on board. The first instance of how Jed will act begins here. When a rather mouthy crew member started moaning about our condition, he was not sentenced to immediate execution. He was instead sentenced to lashing at Abelard's command, because a good Arbites knows that the punishment must fit the crime, and mouthing off only deserves a few whippings at most. He even showed his utmost of generosity by giving the children of those slain on the ship treats and kind words, since to my knowledge being upset that your parents are dead is not a crime in the Lex Imperialis. Not on the long arm at least, and because I'm a rogue trader, I can freely make the laws of my vessel whatever the hell I want. The people who did not receive this mercy were a band of pirates we came across. Their ship battered and damaged. Upon being informed they were from a prominent piracy group, they were promptly shot down. Piracy goes against Code 4218 subsection 8C-12 PAL of the Lex Imperialis, and will be met with a punishment that fits the crime. The same penalty was applied to Felix of House Orcelio, who had committed the crime of appearing vaguely suspicious in front of me. In spite of having a reasonable answer to all of my questions and accusations, in the Imperium of Man, being innocent on trial means you are still guilty of wasting my precious time. This man can therefore rot aboard this station while I grab my ship a new navigator. After dealing with a bit of a riot and getting a new party member who had left a dreadful mess on the floor behind her, we can finally head to Rykard Minoris to gather some replacements for all our dead crew. Landing on the planet, we can clearly see that Imperial law has fractured here, and Drudge Jed is just the man to see it restored. Blasting his way through heretics and acquiring a needed tech priest follower, the scum of this planet had no chance of stopping the ironclad boot of justice being delivered to their asses. That and Cassia sending a good dozen of them to hell at once. As a navigator, she's fully sanctioned by Imperial law, so when she casts horrific visions of unreality on unsuspecting people, it's all very by the books and legal, you see. Taking a brief rest to execute a man who couldn't have planned any worse of an ambush if he tried, we destroyed the anti-aircraft gun, keeping our shuttle stuck on this backwater planet, as well as eviscerating the rebels operating it. To my utmost of joy, we soon find out that this planet is not nearly as lacking in law as I had first thought, as we see a group of the Adeptus Arbites' finest keeping the peace. Among them is the goodest of boys, so I know their loyalty to be firm even as that of this world's citizens grows laxer and laxer. In spite of them saying they aren't directly here to deal with the uprising, my trust in them if anything only grows firmer. If this is how effective they are when a planet-wide rebellion is of moderate at best consequences to them, I can only assume their true task, which is incidentally the recovery of a tithe vessel, to be of monumental importance. After dispensing justice onto a man who was blinding people in order to let them see, and if you need further proof those who break Imperial law are completely insane, then I can think of no better example than that, we finally made it to the command bunker of the planetary governor. With him rapidly wheeling between being helpful to me and trying to deny me the right to bring my new tech priest buddy on a mission with me, it was with once again the utmost joy when the Arbites from earlier burst in to arrest him on suspicion of stealing the tithe himself. When he attempted to plead his case, he was told to shut up. And when he attempted to plead to me that he not be taken away like this, I said in what I can only assume to be the smuggest tone possible that I would never think to oppose a servant of the law. We swiftly move on to a Mechanicus temple facility where some more heretical shenanigans are occurring. We also came across an inquisitorial acolyte, and since he has shown, shall we say, advanced interrogation skills, Drudge Jed immediately welcomes him into the party. After all, what better party member for a lawman can there be than a man who by virtue of his career can technically never break any laws. Anyways, after cutting our way through some heretics, during which time I most certainly did not accidentally walk half my party through an electrical field, the final batch of enemies in the facility was found and dealt with. Partly through good old-fashioned firepower, partly through the tech priest being tortured using his go-go gadget electrocute all the bad guys power. In spite of his valiant service, he had committed the crime of being at least slightly corrupted by chaos, and his sentence therefore fit the crime. To be clear, while I did not technically tell Jed to fire at him 3 times, I am not displeased he did so. One can never be too lax in dishing out justice, after all. Descending further into the facility to the power core itself, we find the culprit behind all these cultists. Aurora, a woman who has yet to realize the law has caught up to her. Unfortunately, justice will not be met out by us, as after we butcher our way through her guard, she uses her own special ability, not on us, but on herself. Go-Go Gadget, fork in the power outlet. Our troubles of course didn't end here, as the parade in Jed's honor was not only interrupted by both heretics and the ghost of Aurora, but some enterprising Xenos deciding that kidnapping people was far too mundane a thing to do, and instead stole an entire goddamn sun. Thank you, Drukari, very awful. On our escape from this soon-to-be-doomed planet, we ran into a variety of cultists and enemies still attempting to end our lives. I would like to claim that we valiantly cut them all down, but the Arbites showed up once again to obliterate everything in front of them. To be fair, we did put a few people down, but a solid 80% of the damage done was either by this fine chap with a minigun or the raiders themselves firing into their comrades' backs. But in the Adeptus Arbites, we take those kinds of wins, so we pressed forward. When a Chaos Space Marine who revealed himself as the true Aurora finally showed up, I wasn't even worried, because he made the mistake of making his grand entrance with an Abelard distance. Oh, and we also did this. I mean, come on, did you see what it was like down there? I only regret I couldn't do that sooner. For the next leg of our journey to the settlement of Footfall, Jed made the decision to arrive incognito to the world. While arriving in the full pomp worthy of a rogue trader is appealing, arriving largely unseen will hopefully embolden any would-be law-breaking scum to act more brazenly, quickening the resulting fitting punishment. After a short break to deal with some would-be spaceborne muggers, these suspicions were proven immediately true as a gang of ne'er-do-wells attempted to see us brought low at the spaceport. As you can probably expect, this did not go as they had planned. Further proving to me that Footfall was a den of criminality was this initially innocuous-seeming funeral service. After mistaking me for some fella named Fidelio, I was invited in to the tune of every single person turning to notice me with seemingly malicious intent. While the poisoned liquor presumably meant for this Fidelio character was a good indicator of things, what really tipped me off was the person in the background simply labeled Suspicious Tech Priest. While not quite as on the nose as Serial Murder Dark Mechanica member, I feel a name like that counts as probable cause. This suspicion only proved correct when, in a perhaps slight lapse of judgment, we entered a crematorium on the promise of some dude telling us that for real there was some valuable stuff back there. When it lit us on fire, forcing us to escape into the floorboards into the sewers, my mind was set on the punishment these cretins would be receiving. Thankfully, some kindly sewer dwellers put us out with their soup, and since being poor isn't a crime, Jed rewarded them with alms. What exactly those alms were, I don't know, but given that these people live in the sewers beneath the crematorium, I can't imagine it took much to make them happy. Upon our re-arrival, all pretense was dropped, and while it was at least slightly impressive to see that even the goddamn priest was throwing hands with us, all criminals, be they garden variety or holy men, meet the same fate. With two of them living and the daughter of one of the survivors making an appearance, Drudge Jed calmly weighed his options. On the one hand, their biggest crime was attempted murder, which admittedly is a serious crime, but it was so poorly executed it almost feels rude to begrudge them for it. On the other hand, you know exactly what the punchline is here.
Stood a chance. Another enemy down.
Hopefully this will serve as a shining example of why to never turn to crime to the daughter of the man I just gunned down in front of her. I did stick around for the funeral of the man in the casket though, since while a pirate in life, his death was about the only punishment I could think of and he was already dead. Might as well stick around to watch the finale. All of this took about an hour, which while fitting this many killings into an hour is impressive in its own way, this was still an hour I had put off talking to the Liege of Footfall. After rectifying this, Drudge Jed was tasked with delivering shipments of food to Footfall, which is going through a bit of a famine. Mention was also made of the Anvers Gang, a band of violent thugs and revolutionaries of which the mere membership of such an organization constitutes the most extreme of fitting punishments, as well as an apparently thriving Xenos trade on Footfall. Such a thing is incredibly illegal, and anyone caught up in that we come across was going to be summarily dealt with. We were also ambushed immediately upon leaving the Liege's palace, which at this point isn't even worth mentioning. Grass grows, the sun shines, and people get ambushed on Footfall. At this point, Jed doesn't even want the gang dealt with for being foul criminals. It's just annoying trying to take a walk to and from your ship only to be mugged by everyone within a half-mile radius. To rectify the constant gang warfare in the street, my first response was to leave. Well, to be honest, that isn't entirely true. My first response was to walk around an alley, get jumped for what I think was a fourth time, but I've honestly lost track, and then have this meathead one-tap two of my party members before the rest of them started lighting us on fire. At this point, I am no longer pressed to give this planet any of the food I originally promised. Some of you may be saying, now that doesn't sound like a terribly lawful good thing to do. What about all the suffering the good people of Footfall will experience because of this? My response to that is that there would have to be a single good person on this rock for giving them food to constitute as a good action. Unfortunately, since Footfall's population seems to be 90% armed robbers and 10% people profiting off the armed robbers, it doesn't appear I'm serving the Emperor by feeding these miscreants. Instead, we head to the capital world of the Von Valencius dynasty, where I hope and pray to the Emperor that I will have at least 3 seconds worth of peace. After a minor issue of some of the clans of the Undership rebelling was dealt with by my fairly punishing everyone involved, we arrived at the capital world with minimal other interesting things happening during the journey. Thankfully, the experience I got from nothing happening to Adira left Jed able to spec into the bounty hunter archetype, and among other things, Pascal being able to spec into the new overseer archetype. With his new overseeing skills, we have been able to determine that, why yes, I am in fact now being mugged by the goddamned Adeptus Mechanicus. At least this time they were just trying to steal my tech priest instead of my property, but on account of Pascal being mostly metal, I deem he too counts as my property, and as such these cogheads will receive a thief's punishment. The crime is thievery, the sentence is death, and the method is Abelard. I'm not entirely sure how the new Servo Skull familiars were helping during all of this, but their presence was if nothing else an immense morale booster that I will now attribute this victory to. The capital world was thankfully fairly uneventful, really just some minor conversations about how I'm now officially in charge after the prior rogue trader's death. There was a slight issue with one of the nobles of the world giving Abelard's family shit, whereupon I responded by letting Abelard's family be the ones in charge of my coronation. Drudge Jed may be a proper man of the law, but he is also an incredibly petty asshole. Our next stop was to briefly return to Footfall, partly because the Adeptus Arbites from Rykard Minoris wanted to meet with me and I would never refuse such an illustrious summons. Mostly, however, I was just really hoping that if I put off feeding Footfall for long enough, then the whole place would starve. On the way, Cassia said hello to me, and the death cult in my basement sent me some mail, where instead of a letter, they send gallons of blood. The first incident was a pleasant chit-chat with a friend, and to the incredibly limited legal knowledge of Drudge Jed, covering someone in blood is not technically illegal, so that second one isn't anything to worry about right now. If I get a status ailment informing me I've caught some sort of bloodborne disease, then I'm going to rip my way into the lower levels of this ship and personally acquaint the death cult with the Emperor himself, but until then it is filed away in the cabinet in Jed's mind labeled not my fucking problem. To my utter shock, the 30-foot walk to Solomorn the Arbites on Footfall was not met with me getting mugged again, but a task to assist him in hunting down a rogue psyker turned pirate. Finally, a chance to properly assist in legal operations, and it doesn't even have to take place on the scrotum of the galaxy that is Footfall. Cassia said hello a second time, and despite my inability to tell if I successfully hit on her or not, I must have succeeded because her personal servant delivered me a lovely looking flower later. Of course, that conclusion was what I, Colin, was able to put together. Drudge, meanwhile, promptly failed 2 different skill checks and resolved to ask his bridge crew which of the thousands of people on this ship could have possibly had Cassia's personal servant send me a flower. Truly a mystery that could stump even the sharpest of inquisitorial interrogators. After arriving at the system our target was located in and scrapping every random crashed ship for parts, we closed in on our target post-haste. What initially seemed like a rather scary space battle turned out to be a one-sided slaughter, as our esteemed foe's fleet seems to have been cobbled together by something with the intelligence halfway between a rock and your average orc, both not wanting to damage the ship promised to him as a reward, and desperately wanting to kill everyone involved in this personally. Drudge Jed valiantly gave the order to charge in, and the fighting began. Initially it went well, with Jed firing down on the riffraff accosting our Arbites friends. Then we actually started fighting ourselves, and it went rather less well. One reload later, and with the application of actual thought in the battle rather than sending in Abelard and calling it a day, we were victorious. Our psychic pirate foe tried to have a quick chat, and we informed him what we thought about any words that come out of his mouth. Rushing to meet him on the bridge, however, we were pinned down by bolter fire, and Jed requested help from the Arbites. When this happened, I figured we were about to enter cutscene mode. To my very pleasant surprise, this wasn't the case, as I instead began playing as Solomorn's squad for a bit. And here, in order, were my following reactions. Oh hey, this is cool. I didn't think they'd get a separate segment. Oh shit, these guys kick ass.
I have to break your neck.
So yeah, they all died. Unfortunately, all of the Arbites that weren't party member material, as evidenced by the fact they were wearing helmets, were slain in an explosion caused by an ambush of servo skulls. Solomorn, however, was pulled out by Glado, most faithful of hounds, and managed to disable the turrets laying into the main crew and allow entry into the bridge to face our quarry once and for all. And boy did it not go well. Between me leaping Cabela into the energy shields around the bridge to see if she could clear them and accidentally knocking our only reachable enemies out of the shield, the first attempt at taking down the captain went exceptionally poorly. Though Jed managed to convince some of the bridge crew that he'd spare their lives if they helped him, which as an aside was a bold-faced lie, we were unceremoniously held at bay until the ship transitioned into the warp, without a Geller field. So yeah, that ended about as well as you could hope. The second time around, I disabled one of the barriers keeping us locked in place. This went a bit better, but because of the lack of others helping us, the entire bridge was focused on us, and it was eventually down to, as always, the rogue trader's faithful seneschal against the entire enemy horde. To Abelard's credit, he performed spectacularly, cutting into them before everyone else died, and then afterwards continuing to take on the bodyguards of the Psyker and coming out on top more often than not. Unfortunately, he ran out of medkits before that Drukhari mercenary ran out of black hole lasers to throw at us, and despite preventing the warp transition, we were still slain. The third time, I figured I would just listen to Solomorn. He had his own plan of attack that the previous two tries I had neglected due to wanting to be more, well, rogue traitory. While my initial suspicion of it only letting me eliminate a single bridge guard was correct, Glado and Solomorn followed it by killing their own as well. With complete freedom within our arena, aside from Captain Psyker throwing fireballs at us, shooting one of the pillars locking us in was simple. Initially, this seemed like all would be well. The two bodyguards locked in with us were dead, the bulk of his forces were weak, everything seemed doable. Then we died anyways. Truly, we faced a conundrum. Our enemies were fierce, the terrain unfavorable, and all options seemed to end in failure. Then I remembered that despite being a man of the law, Drudge Jed was still a rogue traitor through and through. So using the sheer power of the economic assets at his command, Drudge Jed opened the options menu and bribed the difficulty down to a lower level. Could I have potentially done this without resorting to making reality itself revert to easy mode? Almost certainly. Am I bad at video games and going to do it anyways? Yes I was. I did at first at least feel a little bit guilty, then this unrelenting dickhead turned into a chaos spawn with 500 health and started spawning in Nurgle demons. Any guilt I felt about taking the easy way out evaporated alongside most of my party, but the courage of the rogue traitor and his trusty seneschal as the last man standing carried the day in spite of the odds. After briefly looting the bridge, it was determined the Heartless, the ship that once held host to a heretic most foul, would serve as an escort to the Von Valentius dynasty's trading vessels. And with that, Solomorn himself took his spot in my party. Most people would consider this to be a job well done. A dangerous pirate with psychic powers was dealt with, any remaining underlings he may have had leaderless, and the Imperium that much safer for it. Anyone, that is, but Drudge Jed. His tale, though it will continue on, has one final event of note to be shared with you all. Having gotten several levels worth of experience, new and effective gear, and something resembling official legal power in the form of Solomorn, Jed has one last affair to sort before things can be put to rest. Turning the difficulty back to where it was to truly feel the satisfaction of what we were about to do, the party returned to Footfall and proceeded to get to work. With dozens of Anvers slaughtered, the criminal population of Footfall reduced by at least 0.5%, and Drudge Jed and myself potentially having been corrupted by Khorne with how good killing those people felt, he can finally rest easy knowing he has done the Emperor's work. Though an Arbites' work is never truly finished, the Coronis Expanse now lives in righteous fear of Drudge Jed, and how they're never more than a single unrelated mugging away from their entire planet being glassed. Thank you once again to Warhammer 40,000 Rogue Trader for sponsoring this manslaughter spree my Rogue Trader has been pretending is justice. The Lex Imperialis DLC is out now, so if you too would like to lay down the law on the lawless hellhole that is the Coronis Expanse, there's no time like now to get in on it. And thank you as always to my wonderful channel members. You are the Arbites pattern shotgun to my Adeptus Arbites, letting me bring peace and security to the dissident citizens of the world. If you'd like to support the channel, feel free to subscribe or become a member. Either way, thank you for watching and take care out there. And remember kids, if you see crime happening, make sure to report it to Drudge Jed immediately. After he kills everything in a 3-mile radius, probably including you, you can rest easy knowing that the crime rates of the resulting barren wasteland will be a resounding 0% for the rest of time. Unless you live on Footfall, in which case the crime rates will never drop below 100%.